For my actual microteach, I did a Zoom meeting with my two of my other friends that I know quite well. I did tell them beforehand what it was going to be on and the estimated time it was going to be. I did it about colour theory. I'd had a lesson previously that year in my film studies about colour theory, and I just found it so fascinating, and ever since then I got really, really interested in it. A lot of the stuff that I've learnt from it one of them was a classroom setting, and a lot of the other stuff was from YouTube videos, so quite a similar kind of setting to the Zoom meeting, other than you can't really ask questions, and didn't really want that. I found it something so interesting as colour theory, where you're watching something and you're looking out for stuff, and you're thinking about how these colours make you feel and make you think and all of that. I felt like it was important to have a conversation within that and not just the information about it, because to understand it a lot, you need to have that kind of conversation, have that discussion. And not just that, I find it really interesting. So it was more entertaining for me, and for the people who were watching it, I hope it was more entertaining for them by being able to discuss it. Because of the discussions that I did end up going over my 10-minute mark, but I am happy that happened, because I don't think it would have been as successful if I hadn't have had that discussion with the people. Also, to help me out with the teaching, because obviously it wasn't face to face, it's a little bit harder to do teaching online and through platforms like Zoom. It's obviously there's a lot of technical difficulties. It took a while to get set up and stuff like that, whereas that wouldn't have happened in a classroom. However, I want to make it more like a classroom setting, and I wanted to make it more familiar to the people watching it. So I did make slides, really, really basic, but quite illustrated slides, where I just had some photographs, some kind of colour chart wheels, just some diagrams, quick bullet points and stuff like that, so that the people who were watching me teach had something to look at and kind of had a reference point. I think personally I really enjoyed doing my microteach. I think I enjoyed it just as much as if I had done it in a classroom setting. I taught something that I'm very interested in, something that I've enjoyed being taught myself, and also something that you don't need to know a lot about to understand. A lot of the examples I used within it was stuff like logos, movie posters, music videos and films, so that I knew that whoever I could be teaching this to, they would have had an example of one of them in mind. One of the main ones that I did use was something like a Star Wars poster, and how the colours in it were used differently as the movies went on, and I felt like a lot that could capture a lot of people's attention because they are familiar with that object. From looking back at the video recording and also the audio recording of my microteach, at the time I was even though it wasn't in a classroom setting, I was still quite nervous, because I knew it was I only kind of had one chance at it, especially even more so that I couldn't be using up my friends' time all the time because they had stuff to do. But I also found a lot of the language that I was using wasn't very structured, and it was a bit all over the place. I think this is due to having it being more of a conversation with my friends rather than it being a more formal setting. However, in the same way, I also found they engaged a lot more with that. If I had have presented myself using really, really structured and hard to understand language, they might have struggled to not just keep up with what I was talking about, but to also be interested in it. That is the way that I speak with my friends, so I did it in more of a natural way. However, if I was to do that in a different setting with maybe different people, I would try and make my language a lot more precise and a lot more understandable, because maybe people perhaps who don't know me that well won't know what I'm trying to get across. I also felt like I understood this in my head, so I didn't present it as formal as I should have possibly. Maybe if I had have done a tiny bit more research into the actual topic of colour theory, then maybe I would have learned some more fancy terminology and some things that are a bit more structured than what I did. But I did like the idea that I was just kind of teaching them an idea and teaching them something they can kind of use in day-to-day life. Maybe not in art, but maybe just kind of point it out in their day-to-day life. So if they do watch a movie from now on that uses, if colour theory is a big part of that movie, then maybe they'll realise it now and maybe enjoy like movies a lot more like that. However, like if someone was to need this knowledge in a more formal setting, I would have to do some more research on it and maybe be more precise with my language on that. This is an example of some of the feedback that I got from my microteach.
Like teaching, like sticking to the time.
How prepared do you think I was?
I thought you were prepared with the slides. Because you had like labelled them as well, which was good. It made it easier to talk about it because you could see like image 1, 2 or 3. So you knew where you were looking in the screen. So you separated them out well.
Stuff, like, you kind of like, what's the word, like, went through it as well, like, you talked, like, really well about it, instead of just going, this is that, this is this, like, you like, described it a bit more.
Yeah, you gave examples.
Straight after recording, did you find my microteach? I did ask for feedback, one-to-one, on the video chat with them. I think maybe I should have let it settle a bit more before I did the feedback. I felt like they didn't have enough time to process the actual teach before giving feedback. It was still a bit too fresh. So if I was to do that again, I'd maybe wait half an hour to get their feedback just so that they could process it a bit more. Most of the feedback that I got from them was quite positive. Even though they're my friends, they would be honest with me if it wasn't very good. I think they just more than anything enjoyed the fact that it was a topic that they could have a discussion with. They weren't just sitting there and being taught something. They could have quite an interesting discussion and give across their own points of view, even though it was something that they were just learning about. They did criticise going over the time limit. Obviously, they understand that stuff like that is very important, but I am happy with what I did, and like I said, having that conversation about the topic I found was really added to the teach itself. I could have just stood there and taught the information, but having that conversation really not only made my experience more enjoyable, but theirs as well. I think a big deal of teaching is having a discussion about what you understand about the topic, or what you've learned, or what you understand about it before you even started. And that I've learnt the importance of that, and I don't think my microteach would have been the same without that discussion. They really enjoyed the slides that I created. Obviously, the visuals made it a lot easier to understand, and they had something to look at. Something like colour theory is a very visual topic, so they needed to have something there to understand it. Otherwise, it would be quite confusing and quite dull to learn about. I would also do something like this if I was doing it in a classroom setting. My original plan was to have actual movie clips, perhaps, because I just find it a lot more interesting to learn in that way, to be presented with something and then discuss it and discuss about it, how the colours make you feel and stuff like that. Because something like colour theory is theory, it's nothing set in stone. The colours all mean different things to different people, so it is that I was teaching them more of an idea rather than solid facts, which I found is partly the reason why they found it quite interesting.
One of the main things I found about doing the micro-teach with friends instead of like people at uni or like professors is that it was really hard to get out of the idea of doing like universal truths, because I know my friends so well. I already know all the knowledge that they know, well, not all of it, but a great deal of the stuff that they know. I kind of based my micro-teach around that. After lockdown happened, I knew that the group that I'd be presenting to would end up being people I know or my friends, so I did kind of choose subjects and stuff to look at that I knew they would recognise. During the actual micro-teach, I did accidentally use a lot of language like you do this, you do that, because of the familiarity I had with my friends. I don't think I would have done this in a different kind of setting. I think if I was doing my microteach with people I didn't know, my language would be a lot more broad and a lot more like open-minded compared to what it was with my friends.
In my microteach, my initial ideas have obviously changed from what had to actually happen because of the lockdown. The microteach was supposed to be a 10-minute small little teaching to the beyond educator class in a classroom setting with also the tutors there. I wasn't really nervous about that idea. I was quite comfortable speaking out loud and quite comfortable doing that kind of thing, or doing presentations. However, I was struggling to try and think of what to do it on. A lot of the advice that we were given was make it something we do enjoy, because if we do it and we enjoy it, then that kind of passion kind of comes across in the actual lesson. I also found it really hard to think about only doing 10 minutes. I always found making things more concise is a lot harder than making them longer. Trying to get your point across in 10 minutes is actually something I really struggle with. And I thought, how am I supposed to teach anyone or show a skill or share something in that 10 minutes, especially when a lot of the stuff that I do are quite crafty, art-based, and need a lot of materials and stuff like that. My initial ideas were to kind of make it a lot more hands-on and more of a practical task, because I myself, while in education, did find that practical lessons work better for me. So I wanted to have a go at maybe doing that and seeing if that was the kind of thing I wanted to be more involved in, rather than just your average presentation and speaking kind of lesson. I had a few ideas in mind where I could kind of bring in what I do in my actual course, where a lot of it is photography, collage, media, but obviously that requires a lot of access to equipment, and trying to teach someone how to use this equipment that they've never used before within that 10 minutes would have seemed to be a bit of a challenge. To make it about what I was doing in my course, I thought maybe think about more of less of the practical side of it and more of what I've learned on my course, maybe other skills that I've learned, or just things that I'm interested in, and maybe even want to discover even more.